What is up, and I welcome each and every one of you back to a brand new Civ 6 or Civilization 6 video. Now, as you can tell from the thumbnail, today we are going to be talking about how the corruption mechanic would fix all of Civ 6's problems. Is this clickbait? Just a little bit, but I do think that this would fix pretty much 90% of the problems that Civ 6 has in general. And yeah, there really isn't much else to this intro. If you do enjoy, like, subscribe. Let me know down below if you think my idea is good or bad, or exactly how you would implement it. You know, I love to read your thoughts down below in the comments, and I do respond most of the time. I think I do read all the comments, but I respond most of the time. In any case, let's go ahead and talk about the biggest problem in Civ 6, and that is the snowball mechanic. Now, for those of you who don't know, which I don't think is very many of you, essentially what the snowball mechanic is, imagine you playing on like a snow hill or something. You take a tiny little snowball, right? It's weak, not going to touch anybody, not going to kill anybody, right? Like you could throw it at somebody's face and they're probably not even going to feel it. You just roll it down a hill. And as anybody who's lived in some sort of wintry conditions, you know, Scandinavia, Canada, Russia, all that good stuff, you're going to know that, oh, hey, it's getting a little bigger as it rolls down the hill. By the time it reaches the bottom, it's like some sort of like giant meteor racing towards the earth, and if you get hit by that giant meteor, you're screwed. It's over. Say your prayers. Just make peace with whatever god you have. But yeah, essentially the snowball mechanic is snowballing out of control. It's not like linear progression. It's sort of like how do you say that again? Where instead of like linear progression, it just like exponential progression essentially, and that's sort of the problem we have with Civ right now. I did talk a lot about math, and if you have fallen asleep, I do apologize. But essentially, the way this game works is exponential progression, right? Look at all the cities. This is my Alexander game from a week ago or something like that. Look at all the cities I have, and look at my yields compared to everybody else. Georgia has a lot of science, but that really is mainly because they have a whole continent to themselves, and I literally have not built science buildings in like half of my empire. But yeah, I literally just finished taking out our fourth civilization. We took out the Netherlands, we took out Mali, we took out the Mapuche in a golden age, I might add, just patting myself on the back there a little bit. But we also took out Cusco and Ayacucho. Hold on. Ayacucho. Hey, you choo-choo. That's actually fine. That's probably going to be like a stream city name or whatever. But essentially, we're so far ahead that the game is essentially over. And I'm not saying that... No, the game's literally over. There's no chance anybody wins any sort of victory type. The only chance anybody has is sort of Georgia right now trying to win a religious victory, I guess. But even then, it isn't anything too likely to happen. I don't think I could always buy apostles and stuff like that. Like right here, boom, we knock this guy out of the park. Eastern Orthodoxy gets destroyed. You move back in the city, you click that no majority religion, boom. It's not going to be too hard for me to stop them from winning a religious victory. Aside from that, I've pretty much won the game already, and because of that, it just makes the game too easy in a way. If you know exactly how to completely eliminate everybody and how to absolutely destroy everybody and snowball your lead out of control, then you essentially win the game. It's a GG well played. They can't do anything to stop you. The AI is not smart enough to stop you from doing whatever it is that you're doing. Now, obviously, it is Civ 6 AI. It's not the smartest thing in the entire world, but the fact that snowballing pretty much ensures you're going to win 99.99999% of the time makes it so that by the time you get to the late game, it just gets boring, and you're like, I know I'm going to win. Let me just hit next turn for the rest of the game, and it's just not fun. I mean, come on, guys. Is it really fun hitting next turn towards the last 100 turns of the game? I don't think so. It really isn't, and we got to be careful here, actually. I don't want to lose any of these guys. I think I'll promote you to, like, Martyr, I guess. Maybe you'll die or something. I highly doubt you guys die. Well, maybe one of you will die. But essentially, the snowball mechanic makes it so that the early game is super difficult and super challenging and fun. But by the time you get to sort of the late game, it's just the game is already over and you're pretty much just hitting next turn. It's next turn simulator. And I know that might be fun to a lot of other people, as is me completely removing Eastern Orthodoxy from my empire. But to a lot of people, it, again, really isn't the best thing in the world. And it does get super boring when you know you are going to win the game. So let's talk about how the corruption mechanic completely changes everything and completely prevents snowballing from happening. Hey, Anger Watt, you'll love to see it. Let's talk about the corruption mechanic. How would this work? How would this be implemented? It's essentially simple. What it would do, I guess in my perfect world, would be it would take the second most amount of cities held by a player in the entire game. So for example, if I had 20, Incans have 10, Georgia has 8, it would take the Incans 10 cities, it would add 2 or 3, just an arbitrary number, so about 12 or 13. If you have more than 12 or 13 cities, you start suffering from corruption. Now, what is corruption? Essentially, it is going to be massive debuffs, kind of like the amenity problem debuffs. Like over here, I'm like struggling like negative 20% in all yields. It'll take your outer cities and give them that debuff. Now, how this would work exactly is, let's say I have 20 cities and corruption starts at 13, right? So it would take all those cities, the 7 cities I have extra, and it would take the 7 most furthest cities away from my capital, and it would give them massive debuff problems. So what it would be, let's say it would be negative 70 to 80% to all yields, including food. Not only would that completely neuter those cities from being effective, it would still get, maybe not 80%, maybe negative 50% or negative 60%. The cities would still be, I guess, fine. You know, it's just more cities. It's not going to hurt you or anything, but it would still prevent you from snowballing the game out of control. Those cities would still give you an advantage, but again, the value of cities you'd have wouldn't be 20. It would be like 15 or 16. And then with the Incans who now have 12 cities, it's much easier to go up against someone with 16 cities than it is somebody with 20 cities, if that does make any sense. Not only that, but it would also give you a large other number of problems. Like it would give you a loyalty debuff depending on how far away you are from the capital. So if you're 20 tiles away, it would give negative 5 loyalty. If you're 10 tiles away, it would give negative 2 loyalty. Again, loyalty, you could fix it by just putting in units, putting in policy cards. So it isn't the worst thing in the world unless your city is so far away from your capital that it is literally going to, if it was still, it's going to lose anyway. Like negative 5 isn't a lot. It just sort of speeds along the process, if that does make any sense. Not only that, but it would also periodically spawn barbarians, or periodically spawn like rebel units, I guess, sort of how like you can recruit from neighborhoods. It would do that, and they go around trying to take the city or trying to pillage the city, and it would be stuff like that, I guess. So you'd always have to worry about barbarians, you'd have to worry about defending your super far away outposts, which does make sense historically, right? A lot of the times historically, you are going to be struggling if you have a large amount of cities super far away from your capital. Ask Rome, ask Rome, ask Mongolia, ask, I guess, Alexander's empire in real life. It's kind of ironic, but essentially it is just going to make a lot of sense historically, and it wouldn't be anything too crazy. Now, let's go ahead and talk about why it should be implemented and exactly what problems it would solve. So, the reason that the corruption mechanic would work is essentially a 3-bullet strategy. The first bullet being, number 1, it would make it so that the late game is a lot more entertaining. We all know the slogfest, right? Hit next turn, you've already won, like me essentially right now. I've literally already won the game, it's just a matter of time, but there's still going to be at least 70 or 80 turns because I have to go down the tech tree, then I have to go ahead and build all the spaceship parts, then I have to launch the exoplanet expedition, and despite the fact that I've essentially already won the game at this stage of the game, it is still going to be a long time before I can finally see the victory screen. So a lot of the times people like me would just either quit the game or they would go ahead and just waste 2 hours just click next turn, click next turn, click next turn, click next turn, and that really isn't fun. I mean, come on. Is it really fun just being a next turn simulator? No, it isn't, and this would actually give you a very good advantage, I guess you could say. I don't know about advantage, but it would still give you an opportunity, I guess, to actually be, like, it's not game over. You still actually have to optimize your strategy. Like, think about the first time you ever played Deity, right? By the time the late game rolls around, you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, it's still a close battle because I'm not that good and I'm not super far ahead, I guess, so I am going to have to sort of optimize my gameplay if I do want to win, and that does end up being fun the first couple of times you play. But by the time you really get in the know and you know exactly what it is to win the game, it gets boring after you have a large amount of cities, conquered most of the other civilizations, or just had an insane amount of yields and nobody else decides to build campuses. You're going to be super far ahead and it's just next turn simulator. Now, that might be fun for some people, but a lot of the time, as these guys are literally suiciding their boats into me, it isn't. And having late game where, you know, the AI could still reasonably come out and win the game is still... Oh, can you not attack? All right then, but having a late game where you are still reasonably allowed, I guess, to lose the game, even if you've like completely destroyed anybody, should be, it would be a lot more fun and would sort of force you to play the rest of the game because the game isn't finished. The job's not finished yet. Now, aside from that, the other thing it would give you is the fact that it would make it so that the developers wouldn't have a reason to make early game deities so difficult. Now, in the early game, obviously, the AI starts so far ahead of you that you essentially have no chance unless you either declare war on them or just infinite settler spam. That's really what you have to do, get as many cities as possible. Maybe make it so that they still keep a lot of their yield bonuses, so that, again, they're still going to be a lot stronger than you in the early game, but it isn't anything insurmountable. Maybe give them 2 cities instead of 3, maybe allow them to only get 5 units instead of like the 500 they get, or some crazy shit like that. But I mean, aside from that, it still would make Deity a lot more difficult, but it wouldn't make it anything sort of like impossible, I guess. It would still make it fun, but it wouldn't make it so that, again, the enemy AI is so far ahead that you literally have to play perfect in order to catch up to the AI in the higher difficulties. The third bulletin point I have is the fact that, there's a World Congress over here, is the fact that you wouldn't have a runaway civ. Now, without a runaway civ, again, with the way the loyalty mechanic works or the corruption mechanic works, you're not going to be that much more powerful than the second place civ. Like, for example, what I said, the negative 50% debuff. The Incans have 12 cities, so let's say they get another 2 or 3, so 15 cities. I have 20 cities, so 5 of my cities will get the negative like 50% debuff. I'd have an effective strength of around like 16 cities, I guess. Maybe change the numbers a little bit, but essentially I wouldn't be that far ahead, and it would still make it so that not only me, but if you're doing like a multiplayer game or something, or if you're really doing any sort of game, you would still have a chance even if you haven't snowballed out of control. The other thing is it would make domination civs a lot more, it would make it a lot harder in the late game as well, because again, without all the massive yields you have, you're not going to have planes in like the medieval era or something crazy like that, right? Because if you conquer everybody right now, like look at my science right now, George is making 300 somehow. I have no idea why, but usually the AI doesn't make that much. But again, the Incans, looking at the Incans right now, they're not going to get musketmen before I get planes. It's just that simple. I could literally get planes right now. I could get advanced flight in 7 turns. They're still running around with archers and spearmen. I could absolutely obliterate these guys. But I mean, aside from that, it would make it so that late game you have to be a little more strategic because you're still going to technologically be on the same level as a lot of the other civs, I guess you could say. But yeah, those are really the reasons I think the corruption mechanic should be implemented. Makes the game a lot harder in the late game, makes it a little easier in the early game so you don't have to play as perfect, and also it would make it so that you're never so far ahead that the AI is just, it's just game over, it's just next turn simulator at that point, and you don't even want to play the game anymore because you want to finish and get the achievement, or you want to get the victory screen at the end, but it's boring because you already know the game's won, and it's just next turn simulator at that point. Now, there are some side effects that could potentially happen, but I feel like a lot of these side effects are stuff that could be fixed by just some numbers changes. Number one, it would make it so that it wouldn't be beneficial for you to get like 50 cities or whatever anymore, so that, maybe you can't actually catch up to the AI until the super late game, because if the AI has 10 cities, you can only have a max of 13, and that might not be enough to, win the game, I guess, sometimes. But I feel like that should be the case, in my opinion, because, again, you shouldn't be able to win every single game. It should just sort of be a fun sort of, I guess, challenge, I want to say, every single game, and you losing 50% of your games in the late game would be a lot more fun than losing like 90% of your games in the early game. The other thing I think that it would stop is the fact that the AI is stupid, so they'd still go for like 500 cities, even though they'd get a massive debuff in all those cities, and they'd have a lot of barbarians to deal with, and they just have a lot of stuff in general that they would have to deal with that the AI really isn't, I guess, prepared to take on. But aside from that, I really don't think there would be anything terrible with that. It would stop you from being this sort of super powerful almighty empire that crushes everything in its path. And while that can be fun, if you really did want to play like that, you can always just lower the difficulty, I guess. I mean, aside from that, you can always just lower the difficulty, right? You can always just lower the difficulty, but you can't really increase the difficulty after Deity, and making this sort of more hard, I guess, in the late game, not in the early game, but in the late game, I think it would be a lot better than just making it making you a sort of super powerful raid boss after turn 100. But aside from that, I don't really know any more side effects. Again, let me know down below what you guys think about this idea, what you guys think about the strategy. I think that's going to be it for now. I mean, if you have enjoyed, as always, like, subscribe, comment. Definitely helps me out a lot. We have been experiencing a really amazing amount of growth, and I do appreciate each and every single one of you who does support this channel just by watching my videos. But again, let me know if you guys like this mechanic, if you guys don't like it, right? I might just be completely just talking out of my ass at this point. But, yeah, without further ado, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace. Huge shout out to my members, Cash Christian, Ben Ownby, John Blair, Jackson Perez, Polaris Gaming, Empyreum, Adam Mester, Jeff Utzler, Kim Cosmos. A really special shout out to my Oh My God subscribers, Robert and Overflow of Amenities.